Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at O Lamm Gottes, unschuldig, which translates to O Lamb of God, innocent. A couple of interesting progressions in this chorale, a couple of unique cadential situations as well, which I'm interested if anyone has any alternative takes in comparison to the ones that I have. I'd love to hear about them. But we're just going to hop right into the analysis. So we have one flat in the key signature. We start on F major, we end on F major. I reckon we're in the key of F major here. And after these passing tones that we have in the bass, we have A, C, C, and F. But I think the most interesting tone in here is this E flat, which implies that this F chord I think is going to resolve to B flat. So instead of this being our tonic triad in first inversion, I think this chord is functioning as 5, 6 of 4, because F is also the dominant of B flat. But regardless, this D and this E flat are both non-chord tones. We have B flat, C, E flat, or sorry, E natural. Oh no, it is E flat, B flat, C, E flat, and F, which is, I think, alluding to a B flat major chord, but we have a double suspension. We have a 4-3 here in the alto and a 9-8 here in the tenor. So this double suspension ultimately resolves to 4 with the B flat, the D, and the F. But this A here is a little passing 7th. And then we go back to E natural here. We have B flat, G, E, and C, which spells C7 over B flat. That's 5-4-2. And we know that 5-4-2 we would expect to resolve to 1-6, because 4-2 chords, typically speaking, the bass resolves down by step, and the root is a fifth away. So if that's the case, then this would be a tonic triad, F major in first inversion. C is also a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We have A, we have C, we have F, and we have C, so it resolves the way that we would expect. A little passing tone in the bass as well, and a chordal 7th here, non-chord tone here in the alto as we get ready for our cadence. Now our cadence, I think it's a half cadence. We have one of these cadences with a secondary dominant before it, but if you hear this B natural as a means of modulating to the key of C major here, you could also classify this as a perfect authentic cadence, but I hear this as a half cadence because the melody feels like it wants to resolve down to F. That's just my opinion. But we start off with F, C, A, and D. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. That would be if we were in the key of C major, but in the key of F major, it's functioning as like a 6-6-5. And then we have G, D, G, and B, G, B, G, and D, which is G major, 5 of 5, with the passing 7th in the alto, and then we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C, which I hear as 5, but if you feel like this is an authentic cadence in the key of C major, I think that's totally valid as well. So moving into the next phrase, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F major, no modulations, so we start the phrase off with A minor, A, E, and C, which is our 3 chord, kind of as a substitute for F. We then have D, A, E, and F with the 9-8 suspension over the D. It's kind of interesting. It's common for us to see 9-8 suspensions over root position tonic triads the most, but for some reason D minor chords also get thrown into the mix, even though it's not really functioning as a dominant here, but D minor is our 6th chord in the key of F. We then have E, G, D, and G. I think this D is a 7-6 suspension over the bass, and that would make this C major over E, which is 5-6, and then we get F major. Remember this progression later, 6-5-6 going to 1, F, F, C, and A. Tonic triad root position, passing 7th in the bass, D and E natural are non-chord tones as well, kind of reminding me of the beginning of the first phrase as well with this little thing, except for the 16th notes are on the end of the beat rather than before the end of the beat. We then have D, F, F, and B flat, which is B flat major over D. That's 4-6. B flat is a chord tone, D is a chord tone. It actually takes the chord and briefly puts it in root position here. before we go towards our cadence, we have C, C, F, and A, which is F major over C. That's 1, 6, 4. E is a little passing seventh, D is a little neighbor tone here. And then we get C, C, E, and G. It's very common for us to see 5 after a 1, 6, 4 chord. Use the bracket there to link the two of them together. It's not really essential, but the way that I learned, use a bracket when you show the relationship between the 1, 6, 4 and the 5 chord. A little delayed passing seventh here in the tenor, and a little anticipation here in the melody before we end the phrase on F major. F, A, C, and F, tonic triad. Root position. This next phrase is also very interesting. I think it's another half cadence, but I think you could also make the argument that it's another perfect authentic cadence. I think it just depends on how you hear it and just your relationship with the harmony. To me, it is a half cadence in the key of F major, even though we have a brief modulation here to the key of D minor because we have some melodic minor going on here in the bass if you're looking ahead with the B natural and the C sharp. But we start off in F major, we have F, we have C, we have F, and we have A. No need to reanalyze. That takes us to another F major chord. It's the same thing. Little passing seventh in the bass before we get D, D, F, and A. It's D minor in root position. That's our 6th chord. And I do think this starts us off with our modulation towards the key of D minor. So after this passing seventh in the bass, we have B natural, D, F, and G, which is G7 over B. That's 4, 6, 5. Harmonization of the melodic minor scale, not a secondary dominant, not like 5 of 5 that we saw earlier, or at least what I analyzed as 5 of 5. Next chord is A major, C sharp, A, E, and A happens to be in first inversion, 5, 6, and then we get D minor, D, A, D, and F, which is our tonic triad in root position. Just want to double check that real quick. Yeah, that's perfect. D minor, which I think also takes us back to the key of F major, very similar to how our first phrase ended. So we have what I've been calling in previous analyses a mid-phrase modulation, where we modulate to a key, and typically when we modulate to a key in Bach, we don't have an example in this chorale just yet. When we modulate to a key at the beginning of a phrase, the phrase typically ends in that key. However, sometimes Bach modulates and then modulates again, whether or not it's to the same key he started with or whether it's to a different key. I actually don't know that offhand. I'd have to look at my notes, but my intuition tells me it's usually to a key other than the one you started in or the one that he started in. But regardless, this C in the melody really feels like it's carrying the F major tune still, which makes me feel like we're in the key of F major rather than in the key of C major, despite the B natural going on here. So D minor is going to be our 6. We then have E, G, C, and E, which is C major over E, 5, 6. Remember that progression, 6 going to 5, 6 going to 1. This is just a subdivided version of that same progression, F, A, C, and sorry, not F, but D. That jumped ahead there. But yeah, this would be a D minor 7 over F, which would be 6, 6, 5. Sorry, let me go ahead and write that a little bit better. My setup is a little bit cramped today, so I'm trying my best to write through the camera. And then we have G, G, F is a chord tone, and B natural, which is like 5 of 5, G7, or sorry, G major, 5 of 5 there, and then we cadence on 5, C, E, G, and C. So whether or not, this is actually a pretty cool progression, 6 going to 5, 6 going to 6, 6. This pattern is very common when we have the tonics on either side and the leading tone chord in first inversion in the middle of the two of them. But this pattern of chord in first inversion, and it being bridged by a chord that's a diatonic step below in first inversion is a very common pattern in Bach. But whether or not this is in the key of C major, I think is entirely up to the way that you hear it. I personally hear this as F major. This 6-6-5 chord really does feel like a progression like the one we saw in the second phrase, the last phrase of the A section, just because the lower voices really feel like an F major chord, and this D sort of feels like it's being purposed to hold over the two chords, but this 5-6 feels like it's resolving, at least in the supporting voices, to an F major chord. And it just makes that this phrase feels like F major to me rather than C major, but analyzing it in the key of C major would also make sense. The next phrase is also very interesting. We have some chromaticism in the bass line here, and it ends in a half cadence in the key of G minor. So we start off with F7, which is kind of interesting. We have A, F, E flat, and C, which would be 5-6-5-4. And it goes to B flat, F, D, and D, which is our it's B flat major, it's our 4 chord. We have some passing tones in the inner voices, which gives us B flat, G, E, and D, which is E minor 7 flat 5 over B flat, which I'll use an arrow here so it doesn't get too cramped. We have 7-4-3, half diminished. That takes us to 1, so it's cool that we have this subdivided chord progression that involves 4 and 7. It's probably the most common subdivided chord progression in all of Bach, or maybe just in general. It's very common for Bach to subdivide predominant, dominant, then some type of resolution. But here we have F, A, F, and C, which happens to be our tonic. B flat is a non-chord tone, G is a non-chord tone, A is a chord tone, so we won't mark it. And then we get F, C, G, and C. I think this F is a lower suspension, probably a 9-10 suspension underneath the alto, but this is probably C major over E, which is 5-6. And then we're getting ready for our modulation, because we see the E flat and the F sharp sort of happening at the same time here in the next measure. So this F chord here, F, C, F, and A, probably our modulation point, F major. And then we have this D and this B flat happening here at the same time. I'll say in G minor this is now our 7 chord, but really it's sort of just continuing this idea of F major turning into F, or F7 turning into F diminished. F sharp fully diminished 7th, sorry. But actually coincidentally with these two voices we have F, we have D, F, and B flat, which spells B flat major over F. And I think what's happening here on the end of the beat is we have a 3 chord in second inversion. And the inversion doesn't really matter too much with these subdivided chord progressions. It's more so the Roman numeral, just because it's often that the bass isn't moving. But 7 typically wants to go to 3, especially subtonic 7th going to 3 via the cycle of falling fifths in minor keys, which is pretty cool. But what ends up happening is that 3 just ends up going back to 7 again. We have F, E flat, A, and C, and this chromatic bass line changes the quality of the chord from 7-7, which is F7, to 7 fully diminished 7th, because that's just what happens when you take the root of a dominant 7 chord and raise it by half a step. But effectively we just see this chromatic bass line approaching our tonic G minor, G, D, A, and B flat. Very common to see 9/8 suspensions over tonic triads in root position. And then G is a chord tone. G is our chord tone here, so we don't have to mark it. And then we have one of these suspended cadences where basically the flip side of the same coin, it's common for us to see 4/3 suspensions over dominant triads in root position. D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord. Next phrase is going to take us back to the key of F major, and we're going to close out with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of F. We have B flat, D, G, and D to start the phrase off, which is G minor in first inversion, which is 1-6. And I do think this is where we go to the key of F major. This is now a 2-6 chord, and we have some passing chromaticism in the bass too, which changes the quality of the chord. We have B natural, and we have F, which turns the chord from G minor in first inversion to G7 in first inversion, which would be 5-6-5 of 5 in the key of F, and it's sort of just functioning as an intermediary chord between the 2 and the 5 chord, which we know is a very common chord progression, not just in Bach, but in, common practice period, tonal music, C, E, G, and C. It's our 5 chord in root position. Passing 7th in the melody, we have D, E, F, and A. Again, 9/8 suspensions over D minor chords, very common. But yeah, D minor is our 6th chord, not functioning as a tonic, but rather a substitution for a tonic, a deceptive substitution. And that takes us to C major over E, E, D, G, and G. This D being a 7/6 suspension over the bass. And that would take us to F major, F, C, G, and A. G being a 9/8 suspension over our tonic. It's one. This little neighboring 7th here in the alto as well. Before we get ready for our cadence, we have A, C, F, and C, which is just taking our tonic triad and putting it in first inversion. No need to reiterate the Roman numeral here. A is a chord tone, so we don't have to mark it. B flat is a non-chord tone. C is a chord tone. We then get D, F, F, and A, which is our 6th chord, D minor. C is our passing 7th. A is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then have B flat, D, F, and G. We know Bach loves 2-6-5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. This is G minor 7 over B flat. That takes us to C major, C, C, E, and G. It's our 5 chord, passing 7th here in the tenor. And then we have F major, F, A, C, and F. Tonic triad in root position. And that is today's analysis. All in all, maybe not even the most straightforward chorale. There are a couple of sections in here that are still up for debate, whether or not these are authentic cadences or whether or not they are half cadences is largely up to the analyst. I hear them as half cadences because I think the harmony is derivative of the melody. So if the melody says one thing and there is ambiguity, I look to the melody to break the tie. But if you analyze it as a perfect authentic cadence because you think the analysis makes more sense in the key of C major, and maybe it's just the fact that the melody carried or maybe skewed what Bach was really going for, functionally speaking, then that's totally valid as well. If I saw both of these on a piece of paper and I was responsible for grading it, I would not have marked either of them as incorrect. I think they're both just alternative takes. Other than that, the double suspension here at the beginning where the B flat chord has the 9/8 and the 4/3 suspension, that's pretty cool. We see our tonic functioning as 5 of 4 a couple of times. We see it, wait, is it a couple of times or just once? Yeah, twice. We have it once here and once here at the beginning of the chorale. We have 2 little chromatic bass lines. They're both ascending chromatic bass lines, which are admittedly not as interesting as descending chromatic bass lines, but they're chromatic bass lines nonetheless. And it's pretty interesting sometimes how they manifest. And then we have a mid-phrase modulation here at the beginning of the B section where we have a modulation to D minor, or at least what I qualify as a modulation to D minor, that ends up taking us right back to F major. But if you kept it in F major for the whole thing and just called this 4 of 6 and 5 of 6, I think that would be valid as well, just because it is a little bit of a fragment. But I don't know, where do we draw the line between tonicization and modulation in some cases? And the last thing would be the where is the progression? The 6-5-6-6-6 progression here in the key of F major. I think that's pretty cool. Typically it's common for us to see that pattern in the context of the tonic being the chord on the, or the bread of this chordal sandwich, with the 1 and the 1-6, or vice versa, being on the outside, and then 7-6 being in the middle. When we have 6s and then 5, it's pretty cool when Bach takes that pattern and modifies it to accommodate different chords. It's just a pattern that he uses often to scaffold stepwise motion in the bass. But other than that, I'm going to cap the video off. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can also hit the notification icon and like the video if you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.